At Yale University, a faculty member is yelled at by students.
It is not about creating an intellectual space. It is not. Do you understand that? It's about creating a home here.
The reason? His wife, also a Yale instructor, had suggested students should be free to wear any Halloween costume they choose, even if slightly offensive. A month later, the teacher resigns.
Get this reporter out of here!
At the University of Missouri,
Don't push me, man.
Don't push me.
students and faculty try to stop a student reporter from covering their protest.
This is the First Amendment that protects your right to stand here, protects mine.
Let's be clear, Shapiro is not welcome here.
And at the University of California at Berkeley, when conservative commentator Ben Shapiro showed up to speak, there were multiple arrests, the school on virtual lockdown, and more than $500,000 was spent on security. Even comedian Bill Maher faced student calls to cancel his Berkeley commencement address, in part because he'd made jokes about Islam.
Whoever told you you only had to hear what didn't upset you?
But at campuses around the country, some speakers were disinvited or simply backed out in the face of student opposition. Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, head of the International Monetary Fund Christine Lagarde, rapper and actor Common. It's got a lot of people asking, what is going on?
I don't agree that you, when you become students at colleges, have to be coddled and protected from different points of view.
No Nazis, no KKK, no.
Some of the protests are in reaction to deliberately provocative figures like white nationalist Richard Spencer.
So you don't believe in free speech at all, do you?
But what happens when the speaker says he is just reporting on his academic research?
Most of my lectures are going after them as members of a new elite that are out of touch with mainstream America.
Charles Murray is a libertarian political scientist with the American Enterprise Institute. His 2012 book, Coming Apart, explores the growing divide between rich and poor white Americans.
I think what I'm saying is important for college kids to hear.
But when he came to talk about it at Middlebury College in Vermont last March,
students and activists shouted down a man named Charles Murray who was invited to speak at the school.
Were you aware that he had this reputation that was very controversial?
Phil Hoxie, a member of the student wing of the American Enterprise Institute, helped bring Murray to campus.
It wasn't a surprise to us that some people might not like the bell curve, but we were not at all hoping that he would discuss the bell curve. We were hoping that he would give a lecture on Coming Apart.
Okay, so here we are.
The bell curve is a previous book of Murray's. It suggested race may play a part in determining intelligence. Genetics, IQ, and race. This is really the chapter.
Yeah.
And asserted that blacks do less well than whites on IQ tests. That set off a firestorm when it was published in 1994. A firestorm reignited at Middlebury.
The speakers the college invites play a key role in our mission as a college.
Senior Jeremy Albin.
And I don't think Murray's scholarship should be part of the academic mission.
It's very ironic that the students who claim to be the most liberal are the ones who are not willing to engage with controversial ideas.
Sophomore Ray Aaron was hoping to ask Murray some tough questions.
At some point, it turned into not an argument of we should protest his ideas, but we should protest his right to share his ideas.
We're going to have a great dialogue if you let us continue.
Murray was set to be interviewed by political science professor Allison Stanger.
We really lost an educational opportunity.
But seconds after they took the stage, students drowned them out with a tirade of shouts.
We didn't actually prevent him from speaking. He still wrote plenty of articles before and after the talk. It was just saying, in this specific time, on this specific stage, we're sending you a message that we do not support your ideals.
Students like Liz Dunn and Jeremy Albin insist that just letting someone like Murray be heard increases the likelihood of violence against minorities.
If you want to engage with the scholar and you believe that your right to see them and engage with them is so strong that you don't care about the potential trauma or the potential violence this could bring to marginalized students, then I think it's a pretty selfish idea of academic engagement.
I think I have the answer. You're not going to let us speak. I think that's a terrible shame.
In fact, Murray's appearance did result in violence of a different kind. When Professor Stanger was escorting Murray out, they were attacked by a mob that included outside activists, and she was left with a concussion and whiplash. Ironically, Stanger was selected to moderate the event because she was seen as a respected professor with liberal credentials.
I actually went back and reviewed the bell curve and prepared really tough questions that I never really got to ask in front of an audience that was listening. It was this real groupthink mob mentality where people weren't reading and thinking for themselves, but rather relying on other people to tell them what to think.
And it isn't just Middlebury. Murray was shouted down at the University of Michigan this past fall as well.
What do you think is different? Have students changed?
Well, the identity politics is way more intense. You are getting this, you can't talk to me about any of my life experiences because you aren't a woman and you aren't black or you aren't poor, and therefore it's almost as if they're saying we have no common humanity.
In fact, some critics say too many college campuses today aren't places for a civil exchange of ideas, but an intolerant world of political correctness. A recent Gallup poll finds that 54% of college students say people on campus are afraid to say what they believe. And if you visit a campus these days, you may feel like you need a dictionary for a whole new set of phrases. Terms like safe space, a place where students can go where they won't be exposed to topics that make them uncomfortable. Or trigger warnings, when a professor cautions students that upcoming material could be distressing. But now, some signs of a backlash.
Discomfort is an intrinsic part of an education.
Robert Zimmer is the president of the University of Chicago. Last school year, the university sent a letter to incoming freshmen that said, in part, we do not support so-called trigger warnings. We do not cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial. And we do not condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces.
Why did the university have to put out a letter like that in the first place?
Part of the way we operate is that we're a place where there's constant open discourse, constant expression, constant argument.
The letter was praised by many, but some Chicago students, including junior Mary Blair, are still debating the meaning of much of its language.
I feel like the letter represented a fundamental misunderstanding of safe spaces and their value and their importance in any kind of setting.
You know, there's a real risk aversion on these campuses.
Law student Eric Wesson.
You know, once people enter the real world, I don't think the real world is a safe space.
I can assure you that all people of color who have existed in a primarily white space know that the real world is not a safe space.
And the war of words is continuing at Middlebury, where students like Liz Dunn and Ray Aaron say the impact of the Charles Murray incident is still being felt.
Why is this a good thing, in your mind, that these protests are going forward?
I think that it's always a good thing to realize that we are actually able to challenge authority and that we actually have a voice and a place and the ability to express that, and that what we have to say and what we're experiencing is important and is something that we can change.
In the end, I think the conversation turned into whether or not we support controversial ideas. And for me, it's hands down, of course we do. It doesn't matter how much we disagree with them.